Okay, Brett, we're live. So we have an awesome guest here with us. We got Brett Swarts. He's the owner of Capital Gains Tax Solutions and also the host of the podcast of the same name. So you can reach out to him at capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. And what he does is he helps high net worth individuals who struggle with huge tax burdens. They get that under wraps. So, buying and selling companies or buying and selling real estate. Brett comes in, helps you defer a lot of those taxes and not have to pay all that to the government. And of course, we were just connecting before the show. He's a baller. He played college ball, which is just awesome. I love anybody who's played any sorts of college sports. So, Brett, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
So, Brett, we actually connected a few days ago, had a really, really fascinating conversation. And one thing that really stuck out to me and was just your knowledge of how taxes work. We'll jump into a lot of the tools that you use to help people pay less taxes, defer those taxes and stuff. And one thing that's really fascinating, Brett, is whenever I meet someone, I jump on LinkedIn and see who our mutual connections are. And we had about 16 or 18 similar connections. What was fascinating is that every single one of those people I know has been very, very successful financially. And so I instantly thought, hey, I should listen to this guy. This guy knows exactly what he's doing. So, Brett, walk us through what you and your team are doing there and what deferred sales trust and what does that mean to everybody here listening?
Yeah, absolutely. So most high net worth individuals, they struggle with capital gains tax, especially any business owners out there that are listening right now. When they become widely successful, and it's somewhere between 30 and 50%. You pay to the United States government and then your state and then depreciation recapture. And so we specialize in what's called the deferred sales trust, which is a capital gains tax solution strategy. And this gives not only tax deferral, but liquidity, diversification, the ability to say goodbye to the 1031 exchange forever, as well for the business owner who wants to regroup and refund his next business venture, all tax deferred. So I'll just give you a quick example, and this is, I think, the best way to talk about these things. We just sold a $2.6 million business for a client. In fact, he actually sold the business. We helped him defer the tax. So he sold the business to his partners for $2.6 million. He had a zero basis, and he had about a $600,000 tax liability. He lived in Alabama, and he's been in the marketing business world, very, very successful. And he's just ready for a change, right? And so instead of paying all of that tax, he used the deferred sales trust and he parked it there. And then he can invest it in stocks, bonds, mutual funds. But what he wanted to do is actually invest it back into real estate, which he did, all tax deferred. So that's what we give is just the ability to defer tax and then start a new venture if you'd like to do that, or just retire completely.
That's fascinating. So this is a perfect example. Let's keep going with this example here, Brett. So someone exits their business. They have a $2.5 million windfall. Most people think, oh, cool, that's a ton of money. And, but by the time all the tax man comes and kind of eats away at all these different fees, and you got broker fees and lawyer fees, you're not walking away with $2.5 million, especially with your tax burden you said was $600,000. So he's able to put, say the 2.6 million minus some of the fees with brokering, the transaction and stuff, into like a separate account. And then what does that look like? He has certain restrictions. Can he invest in, it sounds like stocks, real estate, other businesses? How does that work in terms of like the next steps for him?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the IRS gives these tax incentives. They're called legal tax loopholes to incentivize the money to keep working, right? And so what they don't want to do is, for example, you and I sell a business and just take our money and just sit it in the bank, right? Or just take it and just spend it on boats and cars and our houses, because that doesn't necessarily incentivize the economy. I mean, that's kind of cool for us, right? So what they say is, hey, we'll allow these legal loopholes as long as you put it into investments, right? Investment purpose, such as stock market, right? Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, such as a real estate, such as a new business venture. Why? Because that spurs economic growth, which in turn creates more jobs, which in turn actually creates more tax revenue. So it's completely legal way to do this. After thousands of closes now, 1920s tax law originally, it's known as a seller carryback. We just have perfected it for this niche for the deferred sales trust. So it's really flexible. And what's nice about it is you can either receive income or not receive income. You can invest it again in real estate or not in real estate. And you can use it as kind of your funding source for your next business venture. So it just all depends on what your wealth plan is and what your vision is. And oftentimes it depends on what stage of life you're in. So some of our clients, they're baby boomers, right? And they're part of the largest wealth transfer in the history of the planet. And this is according to the American Bankers Association. There's about $17 to $20 trillion that's going to pass in the next 20 years. In fact, there's about 10,000 baby boomers turning 65 every day. and about 7 in the US alone. And they're really struggling with toilets, trash, liability, employees. These businesses they poured blood, sweat, and tears in for the last 20, 30, 40 years, but they don't know how to get out without getting, again, hammered by that 30 to 50% in capital gains tax. So we got to just kind of clarify your vision, look what you're trying to do, and then just do a mathematical equation. And at the end of the day, as long as your deal is at least $1 million or more net equity and at least probably $400,000 to $500,000 of gain, then you're looking at the deferred sales trust as I think is a real solid, viable option.
That's really fascinating. So you've got this huge transfer of wealth. We've talked a lot about that on this podcast. We talk about buying companies, selling companies, and you're exactly right. You have about 10,000 people retiring every single day. Many of those businesses actually won't transfer to other people or don't have kind of the next person, the next generation, or even just someone there to buy. I actually think there's going to be a huge shift where everybody wants to do everything online, everything digitally. They want to, start the next Facebook. They want to have, a lead gen company. But in reality, there's some really, really interesting local businesses. And this generation that is hitting 55, 60, 65, they're going to decide to move on. And so a lot of what you're trying to do is structure a very flexible system so that if someone is 65, they probably just want an annuity for the next, say 20, 25 years. Or if someone say, they have a big exit at 45, they might be a little bit more aggressive. So can you walk us maybe through two different scenarios of what would make sense for, those two different groups?
Absolutely, and that's actually one of our secrets. We call the optimal timing transformational wealth plan cloning. How to clone a proven wealth plan with capital gains tax solutions and the financial advisors we work with in less than 5 hours to become time, energy, and debt free. So step number one, defining your sale. You're calculating that. We have a free calculator you can use for your capital gains tax liability. And then step number two is your ideal wealth plan, right? And then again, some of our clients, actually about 50 at least percent, don't need or want any income for the next few years, and they'll actually delay payments. And what that does is it lowers their overall net income tax they're receiving per year. Some of them need or want payments, and they'll start to receive them right away, which is totally fine. Now, if the principal is in place, let's say it's 2.6 million, and you earn about 8%, because what this is, just so everyone who understands this, what you're doing is you're saying, hey, I'm going to lend the 2.6 million to this trust, and it owes me all of that back plus interest rate, right? It's actually a promissory note. You're becoming the lender. And because you do it in that order, you are not taking what's called actual receipt of that cash. And so the tax isn't triggered today. So essentially you're delaying, you're deferring the capital gains tax. But in the meantime, hopefully it earns some interest. And most of the, in the investments that it goes into, it'll earn some interest. And then you can live off that interest and pay ordinary income tax on that slowly based upon your needs. But most people, like you said, Ryan, they don't necessarily need 2.6 million all in 1 year. In fact, that sends their tax bracket through the roof, and they get completely wiped out, right? They'd say, well, I'd like to have just an income stream passively and keep that extra, 600,000 working for me, right? It's really just a mathematical equation at that point, unless you need a ton of cash right now. And so we're going to map that out, but realize you can shift it along the way. You might say, you know what, I actually do want to buy that cool boat, or I want to travel the world with my family for a couple of years. And okay, how much is that going to cost? Well, $250,000 or whatever. Okay, great. Let's just send that out. Now you're going to pay tax on that when you receive it, right? Because it's personal use. Hey, no problem, right? But in the meantime, instead of paying it all on 2.6, you're paying it, let's say, on 2.4, right, or 2.35. So it all just depends on what you want. It's your money. How do you want to receive it? We're going to be just that group to help you stay within the guardrails of the trust and to be as tax optimized as possible. And that's really the key. So hopefully that makes some sense.
Yeah, that's really, really fascinating. So a lot of ways that you can structure, say, a business acquisition is you go to the owner and say, hey, look, if we give you a bunch of cash right now, you're going to have this huge tax liability. And so the owner sort of is incentivized, the seller is sort of incentivized to have like seller notes and kind of stretch it over a long period of time. The risk with that is you may not get paid, right? The business might tank. You might just sell it to someone that doesn't trust you, and the business just, never ends up paying you, and you fight legal battles, and it may not be it may not be enough money on the table to fight those legal battles. I've heard countless times of seller financing not working out. But the benefit of this seller financing is, you can delay your tax burdens. And so essentially what you're telling me is you can structure the same thing, but then you could do it with all the cash up front. So you don't have any of the liability of like, oh, I'm not going to get paid 5 years from now.
You got it, right? And we call this the Blockbuster versus Netflix secret of the deferred sales trust, okay? So do you remember going to Blockbuster in the days, Ryan, where you show up on a Friday night and you're excited about that movie? But so is probably 3 or 4 other people who just parked in the parking lot. And it depends on who gets in there first, because that, that stack of movies that's behind that cardboard is slowly going smaller. But you see that movie, right? And oh, it's there. And you're walking, and somebody reached out and grabbed that same movie. They look at you and they smile, and you guys are like, oh, everyone wanted that movie. Well, even if you got that movie, right, it's a bummer you lost it, but you have 3 days to return it. You have to rewind it. If you don't rewind it, you're going to get a penalty. If you know, late fee, it's just kind of an old way of doing things, right? Well, that's sort of like the traditional installment sale or the 1031 exchange, right? I call it transactional type of wealth plan or deal planning, right? And that it's restrictive. Typically, a seller carryback is short in nature, meaning it's 3 to 5 years, and they have really typically no prepayment penalties. And so, yeah, you get some tax deferral for a few years, but then they're going to pay it all, and then you're out. Versus the Netflix, which is the deferred sales trust way of doing things, you can go for as long as you want. These notes can go for 10 years. You can renew for 10, 10, 10, keep going, pass it to your kids. So essentially, you can go for as long as you want on this one. The other one, you're tied to that one single person. That's a good point you bring up, right? You're not diversified. You might have to take back that business, which could be, I mean, you're selling the business. You don't want to have the threat or the thought of having to take it back in case that person doesn't pay you. So you're not diversified. You're counting on one person to pay you, right? Whereas this one, you can actually, the collateral is tied to some of the biggest companies in the world. You can put it with Apple, Netflix, Google, Costco. You can put it into real estate venture of your own or with partners or a new business venture. In other words, you can diversify that 2.6 million over here versus carrying it back for one single person, right? So that's much more powerful. The next one is liquidity, right? You might need money, but this person's like, look, the business isn't doing so well. I can't pay you back right away. In this scenario, you can pull out the cash whenever you want, just pay the tax. So you have liquidity, diversification, longevity, and the last one is optimal timing. You know how Netflix, you can just sit there and just rent a movie? I mean, or just click on a movie. You don't have to rent it, right? You just click it and it's there. It's never sold out. There's never a return fee. You don't have to drive on a Friday night in the rain or in the snow if you're in Salt Lake, right? And try to park to go get it, right? It's a Netflix way of doing things. It's just a lot of people are still stuck in the Blockbuster way of doing things. And the other little nuance here is if you are buying a business from somebody, and especially if it's a good business, they don't necessarily want to give you seller financing, right? They say, come with your cash, right? And even if you're getting SBA financing, you may not even want their terms anyways, right? You want even a lower down payment, and you want SBA financing, which is phenomenal right now with rates. And give them a chance to cash out. And so if you approach them with the tax deferral strategy to say, hey, look, you were going to sell it for $3 million. I'll buy it for 2.8. You were going to pay $1 million in tax anyways, but I want you to talk to Ryan, and who will connect with Brett, and they will help you save $1 million. Would you save me $200,000? So it's a number way to skin the cat. But the key is, how are you adding value as you're approaching to buy these businesses versus everybody else? Right? If you're just competing on price, you only have to pay a little bit higher. But if you're helping them with terms and with planning, wow, you've created what's called a transformational wealth plan, which is what the deferred sales trust does, versus just a transactional wealth plan, which is what the old seller carryback does, if that makes sense.
That is brilliant how you actually structured that. And so just kind of following along, you can have so as a buyer, you need to stand out. And so when you look to buy a company, it's all about price, and there's likability and there's rapport that you can build up with the seller, which is just priceless. One of the things that you're talking about is you can actually bring a lot of value to the table and say, hey, let's pay you even a little bit less. You don't have to do any seller note. I want better terms and better rates over here with the SBA, because you're going to need to do that anyways. But on this hand, I'm going to introduce you to Brett, and he's got a way you can save, potentially, based on those numbers, 10, 20% of your overall sale price, which is immediately going to go to taxes. Gives you one way to kind of stand out. And then two, you're building such good rapport with that owner. They're going to see this isn't just a transactional approach. This is something that I want to be a partner with long-term. And anytime someone buys a company, just because there's a transaction and the buyer takes over the company, the seller gives it away and then moves on, there's so much training and back and forth, and you guys are married for 6 to 12 months. You're going to get along. You need to get along. And if you don't get along or don't trust each other, it's really bad. And this is like, you're setting the stage for the ultimate trust right from the get-go.
You nailed it, right? And I want to tell you just a couple deal stories to kind of bring this to life. And one of them involves a real estate transaction with a gentleman. His name is Peter. He's a client of mine. He's close to 70 years old. He's the baby boomer, right? He's living in Marin, California, just north of San Francisco. And he's driving 2 and 3 hours a week to his property, 18 units in Sacramento, where I live in California. And he's fighting traffic. He's trying to collect rents. He's dealing with managers, employees, and he's trying to, and it's just taking up a lot of his time and his energy, right? And he's made his wealth, and he's ready to retire, but he feels trapped because he doesn't want to do the 1031. You see, in 2008, when everything crashed, he almost lost everything. But held on through all the years, and he's facing a $550,000 tax liability, and he has 18 units. And he goes, Brett, I have 18 units. I go, well, Peter, why don't you do a 1031 exchange? I always try to give each option to really gauge motivation. And he says, well, Brett, I have 18 problems. I don't want to trade 18 problems for 36 problems. He's like, I don't want to trade a 1031 for listeners who don't know. You can trade investment real estate for like kind investment real estate within 180 days, and you can defer the tax. It's another viable tax deferral strategy for investment real estate owners. And so the biggest thing for him was, how does it free his time and his energy? And also, he also had $500,000 of debt on the property. So he could sell, pay off the debt, and move just the proceeds into the trust. And then he goes, Brett, I've never had so much time and energy. Right, I can spend it with my family now. It's more with my family. I don't have to drive and worry about. I think at one point he got a gunshot in the side of his car. Just craziness. It was a tough part of town. He's like, I don't have to deal with that anymore. Like, you don't know what that has done for me and my life. Like, that's amazing, right? So that's one story. And the other one is, I met with the gentleman last week. You'd be surprised if once you start adding value to people, the opportunities that come your way, right? Because if you can help enough people get what they want, you can have everything you want, right? And so as you're adding value to people out there, there's going to be more business opportunities. I'm actually reading a book by Kevin Harrington called Mentor to Millions, and he's a part of Franchise America, and I actually had him on my podcast a couple weeks ago. And as a part of that, he talks about a story or not even really a story, but how he's added so much value to so many people over the years that business deals has come flowing to him. A part of it, they want to partner with him, of course, but he's added value. And that's the idea with the deferred sales trust. You've got a chance to help people save, hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars on their own terms, give them a transformational exit plan, right, versus just a transactional plan. And there's more likely to have more deals come to you. So I'll pause there because I know I said a lot.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. It's funny. I actually just got that same book in the mail, so I'm looking forward to jumping into it. There's a lot to unpack. I appreciate your really concrete examples. People can understand, some of it's lifestyle, some of it's age, some of it's, they're ready to move on. And they don't, there are all these different tools and mechanisms and tax strategies that they can use. This one seems to be a very, very flexible one that you can, customize based on wherever you're at within life. Take us through maybe another scenario. So say, for example, someone is younger, they're not 70, they're maybe 40, and, they sell a property and, they bought it in 2009 at the low, they're selling at the high, and they might make $1 million or $2 million on this property. And they want to turn that into like another acquisition, say another business, or they want to wait for the market to come back down. It's 2020, market's insane, rates are so low. So, right, they want to wait for the market to maybe come back down and come back to more level. So that's why they're maybe doing such a deferred strategy. If they wanted to pull that money out, what are the different tax burdens? What are the different things you need to worry about? Is there a certain process? Are there certain restrictions if you want to pull that out to put into a property or a business?
Yeah, great question. And actually, I'll use an actual deal story. And I think this is one of the most prolific deal stories. We call it the Monday morning quarterback deal story. And in fact, 2006, a gentleman in Minnesota, he's worth a lot of money. He's selling a $20 million asset. And he's looking around for a 1031 exchange. And he's going, these cap rates don't make sense. This is a seller's market. Prices are very high. There's low inventory. A lot of what's still going on right now with real estate. It's the same type of concept. And he's going, I don't want to overpay. And I've done that too many times in the past. And so he learned about the deferred sales trust and he acted on it, okay? And he moved all of his $20 million into the deferred sales trust. And then 5 years later, so he sold his property to that buyer, probably a 1031 buyer who probably overpaid. Well, guess what? That buyer was foreclosed on. So the bank foreclosed, and all of a sudden, guess who the bank called? It called back this client, and said, "Hey, that property you sold, do you wanna buy it back?" He goes, "Well, maybe. What's the price?" And they said, "Well, 60 cents on the dollar." And he goes, "So 40% discount? Yeah, sure." So he uses deferred sales trust to buy back the same property that he had sold, but here's the key: all tax deferred. Okay, so not only did he park the money into the trust, but there's a mechanism in which we form an LLC. And you can, like a self-directed IRA or SEP IRA, your listeners might know about that. You can fund this IRA, you can fund this LLC, and through the LLC, you can purchase in partnership with the trust that business or that real estate. So it's as simple as that. You sell high, and then you buy low, which our parents taught us to do, right? Not sell high and buy higher 180 days later, or even for the people who are, if you don't realize, but a 1031 has to be like kind for like kind. So you can sell investment real estate and you can 1031 into like kind investment real estate. And there might be some sliver way you try to discount, a business, and then if you own the real estate, boost that up. There's some, but that kind of gets into the gray area. But most people I meet do not 1031 businesses, right? They just sell the businesses and pay the tax, or they either do a seller carryback, or they do a deferred sales trust, or they do a charitable remainder trust, but you have to give it all away to charity. So that's where the DST is really nice. So to answer your question, you sell, you park it, and then you can form an LLC, put it in the LLC, and buy that deal, all tax deferred. Or you could cash out if you want to and pay the tax on that given amount at any point. So it's really up to you. Most of our clients, though, will do the former. They want to stay tax deferred, right? Because why pay the tax if you can defer and earn interest on it? And that's where the rule of 72 kicks in, which states if I can earn 7% on any given amount over a 10-year period of time, I can double that amount. And so if it's 10 million bucks and you deferred 4 million, we'll keep all 10 million in the trust. Let's say we earn 7% and we let it all compound. Well, that in 10 years, that'll be worth 20 million, and you can keep doing that. And so that's the idea, is just to keep this money working for you and invest it in a smart way.
So fascinating. There's so much to unpack here. Appreciate all these different examples. With just a couple minutes left, where can people find you, Brett? Where can they learn more? Where can they, listen to your podcast, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. So if you are a owner who's selling something, right, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com and you can schedule a free consultation. Now, it needs to be $1 million or more in net equity, okay? And it needs to have a gain of at least $400,000 to $500,000. Okay, so if you have those parameters, boom, we're a good fit for you. Okay, now if you have a couple business or real estate deals that add up to that, and you're going to be selling all of them at once, kind of thing, then that's good too. By the way, this works for primary homeowners. We just did an $8.3 million deal in Palo Alto. It works for car dealerships, dentists, optometrists. We've done those. Of course, commercial real estate works for Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, works for public stock, private stock. Okay, so realize that the 1031 just only works really for investment real estate, where we work for all asset classes here. Okay, so you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Now, if you're a business professional or you're a buyer like Ryan who's buying businesses, you can go to experttaxsecrets.com, and that's our coaching program, which gives you a chance to learn how to implement, the sales copy, the funnels, everything you can. We can basically clone that, and we can coach you through this strategy, because we truly believe it's the #1 way to attract high net worth opportunities and business opportunities, right? If you understand the nuances of this, but we really do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. But if you go there, we'll coach you through it and get you going.
Love it. Thanks so much, Brett. We'll link to all these in the show notes, and it's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Thanks so much, Brett. Appreciate being on the show.
Thanks, Ryan.